What are the vertical asymptotes of f of x equals 2 secant x minus 5? All right, this is how I like to graph these. And yes, I'm going to attempt to graph this on my terrible computer. All right, first things first, we have an amplitude of 2. We have a midline of -5, and most importantly, secant is 1 over cosine. All right, so what I like to do is let's label that information. Amplitude is 2, midline is -5. So let's actually move this guy way up here because I really don't need it. Okay, so magic happens at -5. Okay. So if you're -5, if my amplitude is 2, that means it's going to deal with -3 because that's 2 above, and -7 because that's 2 below. Now, what I like to do with these problems is I like to draw the cosine function as a rough draft. All right, so if I were to make a rough draft, cosine is going to look like this. All right, like that. Now, magic happens here. It starts at 0. It does this guy right here. It goes through the midline at pi over 2, bottoms out at pi, goes through the midline at 3 pi over 2, peaks out at 2 pi, hits the midline at 5 pi over 2, bottoms out at 3 pi, yada, yada, yada. From this, I know a couple things. My vertical asymptote is going to go through wherever cos x is 0. Okay, that happens at the midline. So that's where my vertical asymptote is going to live. So my vertical asymptotes are going to go through the things where cosine goes through the midline. So these are my vertical asymptotes. To draw the actual equation, you're going to use the peaks and the bottoms of cosine to make some parabola-looking things. All right, so like u, like u, like u, and like u. Now, I did too much. I didn't have to do near enough or near that much. All I had to do was recognize the fact that, all right, well, at pi over 2, and at 3 pi over 2, and at 5 pi over 2, and so on and so forth, we're going to get vertical asymptotes. Now, how do I turn that into an equation? Well, let's start out with pi over 2. And every time I start to add 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, I get another vertical asymptote. So we will say plus n pi. And that's for any integer pi or any integer n. So the answer for this one is going to be B, baby.